Cameron, and this is the Conduit. All right, y'all. I had to wait for it to get a little bit later tonight to come with tonight's program. It's a pretty serious program this evening. So put on your seatbelts. Trigger warning. Trigger warning. We're going to go in. I want to define some terms that you probably haven't heard of in social justice circles, in diversity and equality circles. But we're going to go ahead and kind of talk about it this evening. I'm going to expose you to some things that you may have seen in different sectors of media and conversations that are happening throughout, everywhere from our entertainment on HBO all the way up to our vice president. So it's going to take a while to unpack. So, stay with me. We want to talk about what we're seeing here in the world. And one of the concerns that I've had consistently is I hear things like, or we could even go back to when Obama was elected president, right? And some people were saying, hey, we're now in a post-racial society, right? Which we knew that wasn't the truth. Hate crimes had increased by hundreds percentage points, right, during the era of Obama. And we see what has happened in the era of Trump and what continues to happen in the era of Biden. And so oftentimes, you'll have folks on both sides of the aisle, they'll say, hey, racism does exist. Some may agree that there are institutions of racism that exist, but they really kind of talk about it in these general terms, right? We've got to get past this. We need to work past this. We need to address it. But what exactly is the tangible that is being done to dismantle these institutions of racism, discrimination? And I would submit not much. I would say that racism is alive and well. And when you talk about the black male, and primarily the heterosexual black male, anti-black misandry is at an all-time high. So we want to get into it. And in order to do that, I'll show a few videos. I'll define some terms, and then we'll have a conversation to go along with it. And I will try to get through the whole thing. It's quite a bit of reading that I want to expose you to so that you have this context. And, being in diversity and inclusion circles for the better part of a decade now, these aren't things that were talked about. This wasn't terminology. And if you brought up any of these points, especially when it came to black males, you were shut down. Or, okay, well, but what about us, right? Black lives matter, blue lives matter, all lives matter. That type of thing that actually happens in diversity and equity circles also. Quite a bit, actually. And so then we are suppressed and have to take a back seat. But what we see primarily in the media, in the news, on our cell phones, is black males still being murdered. And oftentimes in government-sanctioned murder. And, I was on the 2x2 studies with Reverend Ellington last week. And one of the I talked about is when you look at um, the institutions of white supremacy or racism, right? It doesn't necessarily mean that it means that a white person is doing it. These institutions, whether it's education, banking, housing, employment, judicial system, policing, right? All of these structures, right? They're institutions. So that means that they run. You can plug and play whoever into that space. So it doesn't matter if it's an indigenous person or a Pacific Islander or Asian American or Hispanic or LGBT or African American or immigrant. It doesn't matter who's plugged into these institutions. It continues to churn on. And the reason why that is true is because, again, these institutions were formed long ago. But as time has progressed, right, we have seen, the institution change over time from a racial aspect, right? More women in the institution, more BIPOC community. So I can just shorten it and kind of include everyone else quickly into these institutions. Again, everywhere from the judicial, from policing, education, careers, housing, education. And still, the results are still happening and still happening and still happening. And so people often ask, well, how? How are we still in this space where these things are still happening? How are we in this space when we have the, Congressional Black Caucus, when we have, a representation of ourselves and other groups in these different positions, but yet and still these outcomes are still the same. We have the first female vice president who identifies as Asian and sometimes as African American. We had our first biracial African American Caucasian president. We've had a lot of firsts, right? We see our representation in lots of different places. So why is it that even though we exist in these spaces, we don't seem to be making much headroom? And understand we're having an intellectually honest conversation. So when I say much, I'm not saying none. I'm not saying that it's insignificant, but it's not nearly where it should be. And a big part of that is meritorious manumissions. Now, we've got to define what meritorious manumissions is or are, because many people have never heard that term. So I'm going to share this with you, and I'm going to read it. And the reason why it's important for me to read this is oftentimes, right, we're busy. There's so many things to get into. We've got to pay our bills. We've got to take care of our children. We need to make sure we've got a roof over our head. We're trying to stay safe from COVID. We have all these other factors, health issues. We have other causes that we love and want to put our time into. And so it's tough, right? It's one of the reasons why I tell people, I don't care to watch, movies like Roots and Amistad and things like that. Like, I live in America. I don't need to watch that stuff. I want escapism. I want Marvel and DC, right? I can just turn off my TV. Well, I could turn my TV on. I could walk out my front door, have those experiences. But let's get into it. What is meritorious manumissions? Well, there was an act of 1710 that was enacted in Virginia. During the enslavement period of Africans in America, the Meritorious Manumission Act of 1710 was enacted in Virginia. It was the legal act of freeing a slave for good deeds as defined by the national public policy and could be granted to a slave who saved the life of a white master or his property, invented something from which the slave master could make a profit, or snitched on a fellow slave who was planning a slave rebellion or to run away. Let's assume that's where the term selling out came from. 300 years later, Black folks are still dealing with sellouts. But I think we should take a different look at this issue. Selling out is a very negative term, especially among Black folks. But for those who sell out, it seems to be a more profitable term. Some of our prominent Black spokesmen are very well off financially because they sold out. They started out as strong Black advocates and activists, and now they are nothing more but sycophants for various causes, political parties, businesses, and politicians. I've often been told that everyone has a number, a price that they would accept to sell out. I wonder what that number was for Marcus Garvey. I wonder if he even had a number. When I listen to his speeches and read his papers, I doubt it. Also, I think about MLK and how much it would have taken for him to sell out. Although many do have a special number, a price for which they would sell out, there have been and still are some who did not and seemingly will not sell out. Malcolm. No matter what. That's where economic empowerment implies. The more self-reliant we are, the less apt we are to sell out because we have our own economic independence and cannot be bought. Oh, that our leaders were all economically secure and had high levels of consciousness, where would we be now? Business ownership and control with the ability to create jobs as well as a code of conduct amongst our people. Yes, complete with penalties and sanctions would curtail the inappropriate behavior of selling another out. Some of our leaders are known for selling us out, and we know who they are. I don't know how they are sleeping, but I know that they are eating pretty well from having done so. They rail against the man, or they criticize us, their brothers and sisters, in order to obtain these manumissions. So you think about when Obama is telling us that we need to be accountable and step up and chastise Black America. So what does meritorious manumissions look like? And why is it so pervasive even today? So I would submit to you again, right? We get comfortable in the society, in the institutions that we find ourselves in. We don't want to lose the $50,000, $60,000, $80,000, $100,000, $200,000 a year job. We don't want it to be hard for our children. We don't want to be ostracized. We don't want to live a hard life where we have to struggle and fight for everything and it's still not enough. So often we go along to get along. What's often tragic is, as what I was reading, many start off strong. I'm going to go in there and I'm going to make the change. I'm going to fight the fight. And as they go to fight the fight, they end up assimilated and become part of the institution. And they were wondering, where's the radical change coming from? It's gone. What happened to this person that was saying how they were going to change everything, how we were so excited, how they got us to come out and vote and support? What happened? Where are they? As some of you know, I do not identify with the Democratic Party. I have not in several years. My dad and I would have discussions about Obama. And while historic, I think it did a lot of harm during his tenure. And the argument of, well, it could have been worse. We could have had someone like Trump. My thought on that is like the saying, you know, you can't go up until you hit the bottom. And America hasn't hit the bottom. We just haven't hit it, right? So during the Trump era, a lot of folks came out, felt free to express their racist views. And folks didn't like that on both sides, right? We didn't like it because it was just so in our face and just straight up. And those that felt like that didn't like the fact that it was kind of being called out. And it was cool for a minute, but now kind of being flipped. They're being exposed. They were painted as being wrong for feeling that way. But I think it's what America actually needs, because we don't want to deal with it. We don't want to address it. We continue to just say, oh, yes, these institutions of white supremacy and oppression and discrimination and racism exist in these general terms with no tangible solutions. Not really dismantling it. We say things like, well, the bad police, there are a few bad apples. But they never finish the phrase, right? A few bad apples spoil the bunch. Oh, they just need to be training. We need diversity training. But somehow you shoot the black person, but the white person that actually has the gun isn't shot. But you're in more mortal danger there. How somehow black cops don't seem to be shooting a bunch of black people, or white people for that matter. So somehow they're able to show restraint, but white cops don't seem to be able to do the same. But they've received the same training. We're not having that conversation. Oh, we're coming up on a hard break. We got to go to a commercial. So we don't talk about it. We don't sit with it. And then something else happens, and then we're on to the news. And then we cycle back for the next murder, and rinse and repeat. Human interest story. Oh, the great Dr. Fauci or something else. So, meritorious manumissions. If you do things to keep the dominant society, the institutions of white supremacy, racism going, you are rewarded. And as long as you are willing to do that, you are useful. But as soon as you are not useful, you've got to go. And they typically actively destroy their toys. So what does that look like right now in our world? Well, we know that there was a State of the Union address. And let's listen to presidential hopeful Kamala Harris, or at this time, I think she was on the vice president ticket. Let's listen to her before they won the election. This is from PBS NewsHour, Fair Use, 1973.
We are a nation that is grieving. grieving the loss of life, the loss of jobs, the loss of opportunities, the loss of normalcy, and yes, the loss of certainty. And while this virus touches us all, we got to be honest, it is not an equal opportunity offender. Black, Latino, and Indigenous people are suffering and dying disproportionately. And this is not a coincidence. It is the effect of structural racism, of inequities in education and technology, healthcare and housing, job security and transportation.
So she is saying that this exists, right? And can name it off where these institutions lie. But she was the one that said, well, I'm not going to do anything for just black people. 400 years. Slavery, Jim Crow, Reconstruction, prison industrial complex, super predators, housing discrimination, on and on and on and on and on. And while bad, the AAPI community has experienced their issues over the past year. We're not watching government sanctioned murder. So 1 year of problems. And granted, yes, there were some issues that these issues stem long before them. There's a spotlight that's on it now. But a year in Congress, 99-1, and the president can push through a bill for $50 million. Instantaneous like that. But when it comes to us, we still need to have these conversations. As Biden said on the Breakfast Club, if you're not voting Democratic, you're not black. At then Vice President hopeful Kamala Harris is acknowledging that these things exist.
The injustice in reproductive and maternal health care, in the excessive use of force by police, and in our broader criminal justice system. This virus, it has no eyes, and yet it knows exactly how we see each other and how we treat each other.
See, that statement right there is offensive. How we see each other and how we treat each other. It's like we have something to do with it. These are the meritorious manumissions. So even while you're calling it out and stating that it exists, now it's we all in this together. We see each other this way, although I can't oppress you.
And let's be clear, there is no vaccine for racism. We've got to do the work.
And that's it. We've got to do the work. They've had 100 days in office, more than 100 days now. What's the work? Mass killings are up. I can't remember how many they said, 119 or something like that this year. And they're measuring that as 4 or more. George Floyd happens and his murder is captured. And you think the police might be on their best behavior, but it almost seems to escalate. And every week we've got a new murder in different ways. Shot in the back of the head, teenage girl killed, child with a knife or with a gun. put his hands up. So, that was Kamala Harris about 8 months ago. And then after the State of the Union,
last night, that America is not a racist country. Do you agree with that? And what do you make of his warning against fighting discrimination with more discrimination?
I believe that we need to, well, first of all, no, I don't think America is a racist country, but we also do have to speak truth about the history of racism in our.
this is what meritorious manumissions are. We will get you there. But you are going to go along to get along. And you are going to play the game. So you've got this person that was acknowledging it 8 months back is now agreeing with Republican Tim Scott, another person who's receiving meritorious manumissions. And you've got two black people in some of the highest institutions in our country saying, no, America's not racist. We just have all these institutions of racism and oppression. But America's not racist. Well, how do you square that circle? Both things can't be equal. We're watching it. What did we go through, what was it, before or right after George Floyd's death? Remember, we had the memes of the Karens and we had the videos. It's like we don't even talk about that anymore. And no, there was no $50 million for people calling the police on black people, again, primarily black men, knowing that could possibly be a death sentence for us. How quick have we forgot about that? Matter of fact, it was made into a joke. Oh, you're a Karen. Now it's just a Saturday Night Live and Facebook and social media meme. But it's deadly for us. And so here you've got a Republican senator and the vice president of the United States of America, both people of color, both one Asian American and African American and one African American claiming, oh no, America's not racist. And as she said,
Our country and its existence today. Its existence today. And its existence today. And I applaud the president for always having the ability and the courage, frankly, to speak the truth about it. He spoke what we know from the intelligence community. One of the greatest threats to our national security is domestic terrorism manifested by white supremacists.
And again, President Biden said, hey, I said it. No one else is saying it, right? You said it. What does that do? Great, you acknowledged it. Continue on as you were. It's offensive. This is how we find where we're at. And you know what's so bothersome about it? And, I love my dad. And for those of you that know my dad, he loved people, all people. But he also would get you told. And he didn't deal with a whole bunch of folk. You had to be genuine. You had to be authentic. You didn't have much time for fake people. And he would tell you, you just walk upright and do what you got to do. And know that, doing that is often a lonely road. Because those that are receiving the meritorious manumissions, see, it's a threat. One, they're not going to talk like this. Two, they don't want to align themselves with someone who talks like this. Right? Because they don't want to lose what they have. So some may try to come and get me under control. Some may try to find ways to get rid of me and remove me. I may not be invited into certain circles, or I'll find my invitations rescinded because I will be labeled as a troublemaker. It will be said that, hey, brother, we're trying to make progress and move forward, and you getting in the way of that. And really what it is, hey, you're going to make it hard on us. You need to fall back. And so what's so sad is it can happen two different ways, right? You could be chasing after those meritorious manumissions. You're hungry, you're thirsty, right? Or somehow you can be exposed to something and then you like it and then you don't want to lose it. So now they don't even need to wind you up and put the battery in your back. You'll go and you'll attack us just so that you can be okay. And as I read before, right? You are freed if you snitch. You're freed if you save the white slave master. You're free if you create an invention or you make them some money. And so today in 2021, that's how that looks, right? As you notice, I am not part of the in-group. And I'm not because they don't know what I might say. See, I could call out the person handing out the meritorious manumissions, or I might call out the person who's receiving it. And either one of those is bad for the receiver of the meritorious manumissions. You know, it took a long time for me to get here. Because I too chased meritorious manumissions. I may always, on some level, be chasing meritorious manumissions. Because this is how I was socialized and raised to value and keep these institutions going. And so you can't exist in these spaces unless you exist in a certain way. Otherwise, you can't be in these spaces, right? There's a decorum that you have to conduct yourself with. When you enter into board meetings, hearings, meetings, public conversations, and so everyone wants to live their truth. But there's some truths that they don't want to live, and there's some truths that they don't want to hear. And we all just have to ignore it and go along to get along. Because I want a good life for my daughter. I don't want her to have to suffer anything. Right? I want to live a decent life. I like to go on vacation and have nice things and eat what I want and drive what I want and do what I want to do. I don't want to lose my ability to do that. I don't want to not be hired at the college or for the military or for the hospital or for the school district, right? The major employers, careers versus jobs. I don't want to be stifled and stymied in those ways. So I need those meritorious manumissions so that I can maintain and maybe accelerate, enhance my life and my status. And it's tough because you can find yourself in this trap, right? I could be asleep and just kind of walking through life. And as you wake up, right? And now even being woke is a bad thing. As you wake up and you realize what's happening and how things are and how these systems are in place and the people that run these systems, blame it on a system that they don't want to do anything about, that they help to keep upright, that they will fight, that they will turn on their own people to ensure that they keep it upright, that they wholeheartedly believe it. See, the irony is you could look at a Tim Scott and say, oh my God, how can he act and say these things? And the Democrats, liberals will say, oh, well, he's a right-wing zealot. He's a coon. He's this, he's that. Well, then you say, well, what about you? And they're like, well, who, me? I'm a Democratic liberal. I don't do any of those things. I want this and I want that. And I'm all for everything and social justice, equality, diversity, all of the buzzwords. I'm not Tim Scott. I'm not this one. I'm not that one. I'm not Ben Carson. Two wings on the same bird. Two sides of the same coin. Why do I bring all of this up? Because we have different levels of being woke, awakened, realizing our situations, understanding the roles that we play in upholding these institutions of oppression. We can't even say certain words when I was working for the Navy. And this was still just this year, right? In January. White people are, some, agree with the cause, but they feel like when you're talking about, the institution of white supremacy and racism, you're talking about them. And they feel bad about that because they feel like you're calling them a racist. And it's like, holy hell. So folks are feeling bad because someone is saying that, hey, there's these institutions of white supremacy. I'm white, so that must mean that I'm a white supremacist and I'm a racist. Ergo, I'm really hurt by that. But yet, those that are suffered 400 years and counting of true oppression now have to stop, sit back, and be empathetic and sympathetic and say, you know what? Okay, it's too much for you. Let's just talk about it in general terms. Matter of fact, let's just not even talk about it. I mean, you can see what's happening nationwide when they're talking about critical race theory being taught in the schools, right? Folks are losing their mind. Meritorious Manumissions. We've got to dismantle these institutions. And that means that the people that are receiving these bennies, maintaining their lifestyles of the go along to get along, they too must be dismantled. And you see it all the time. There are things that I can't talk about right now because I've been asked. It's not my story to tell, so I've got to just sit on it right now. But here in this little small community, you can look around. You can see what circles we all belong to. And ask, why are we not in certain circles? What is it? Is it, man, there's just something about that brother. I don't know what it is. It's just, or is it something more tangible? Can you overcome your past? If we recognize and we say, hey, there's these institutions of white supremacy and oppression, racism that has existed since slavery, and all of the things that Kamala Harris talked about, education, healthcare, employment, justice system, housing, on and on and on. That if we as the oppressed are caught up in the systems, because you can sidestep one, but man, there's like 20 of them. You sidestep one and you fall into the other one, your fault. And now I can't work with you. You're dirty. I often wondered, I'm like, man, there's so many of us in these spaces now. Why hasn't it changed? You've got all these voices, all these advocates, all these people, new groups and committees and organizations popping up, propping up. Many who've been here for a long time. And what's changed? Why does it look the same? And how do you get in? Whose ring would I need to kiss? Would there actually be a diversity of thought? This is something I talked about at the college a lot. And people really didn't understand it. I think someone even said, diversity of thought. I mean, that doesn't even make sense to me. We need representation. But what good is the representation if the representation is Tim Scott and Kamala Harris? That's the representation. Does it look like anything's happening? No. You need diversity of thought. They're going along to get along. They're receiving meritorious manumissions. They're not going to mess that up. She would love to be president. But again, they love to break their tools. So understand, Kamala Harris is now the proxy to take on all the racial heat that exists. And they're already talking about losing Georgia. You just won it. So when you win all three levers of power, Republicans go through and change all the voting laws and do all kinds of crazy stuff. And you just sitting here talking about, I'm President Joe Biden, bipartisanship, and I pride myself on working with my fellow Republicans across the aisle. And in the meanwhile, they're just doing all this dirt, right? It's like Peanuts, Charlie Brown and Lucy. The same thing that Obama went through, right? I'm going to reach across the aisle and work with the Republicans if they would like to work with me. And that's what we're going to do, me and Joe. So in 2 years, when they lose the House or the Senate or whatever happens, and they'll blame it on voter suppression, right? Oh, the Republicans did this. That's why you guys got to keep coming out and voting for us. But you told black people before we even got in that if you didn't vote, then we're not black, that you weren't going to do anything for us, but you promised all kinds of other groups that you were going to do stuff for them. You get into office and then you don't do anything for us directly, but you do pass a bunch of other executive orders for everyone else. And then you lose in 2 years, because I think it's pretty likely that's going to happen. And then it's, well, there's nothing we can do. Oh, we need to focus on infrastructure. Oh, we need to focus on this. Your stuff needs a committee. Oh, your own people are saying that you don't want or need reparations. That wouldn't help your people. Well, who did you talk to? Oh, Cardi B, Herschel Walker. Use strippers to try to get the black male vote. Okay. Yeah, I see who you talk to. Deadly, divisive, and destructive. Meritorious Manumissions. This article is written by an adjunct professor at the University of Cincinnati. The link is here. Let me go ahead and put that in the chat if you would like to read it in its entirety, so that you can understand what meritorious manumissions are and how they affect us and why we are still in the space that we are in 2021. And we watch all these different acts of racism and oppression, violence. And you'll see many black folks say, it's 2021. I can't believe we're still going through this now. And they can't reconcile it. And it's like, but you're not thinking about it. Right? It is the Matrix. The Matrix is such a great analogy to what we are dealing with in America. We don't want to take the red pill. We want the blue pill. We want to stay asleep. Because being woke, man, living in Zion is horrible. And the machine is coming. So read about the Meritorious Manumission Act of 1770. Now, what's dangerous is, again, why I'm talking about meritorious manumissions is there are so many different ways that these institutions of white supremacy and oppression are set up to keep us where we're at. And again, we have to participate in it. It's the only way that it's going to work. That's why you can see the Tim Scott. That's why you can see the Kamala Harris at the highest levels of our government. But it's also pervasive in our entertainment. And right now we are in the age of the woman and feminism. And if you speak out and if you are critical of black women, oh, that is a quick way for you to be destroyed. See, we are told that we need to be accountable. We need to stand up as men. dismantle the patriarchy. This, that, and the other. Anti-black misandry, which is the hatred of black men, is real. I wonder, have you ever wondered why they can actually show black men being shot by cops on TV? But somehow when they're reading an article, well, this person said the N-word and they said this and it's all redacted and blocked out. How is saying a word more offensive than watching death and murder? I just always found that really strange. And I think about it all the time because I'm seeing Black Death all the time on TV. And they're showing it. And what's really odd is the statement before. The images that you're about to see may be disturbing for some. Maybe. They might be. Not that they are. They might be disturbing for some. But, but we're not going to say the N-word. Oh, my God. It was really bizarre to me. I'm just saying. By the way, you are watching The Conduit with me, Marwan Cameron. Follow us on YouTube, Marwan Cameron. Type it in. You'll find The Conduit. Please subscribe, like, and share. I'm also on Facebook, so you may be watching me there or on YouTube. Also, I am on Twitch, which is Mr. Cameron 124. So you can see me there also. Another quick little article that I wanted to share here. Beware of meritorious manumission black leaders. Meritorious manumission black leaders are those black leaders who sell us out for personal gain. They're known as sycophants. And this goes again into the Act of 1710, right? And again, it was the legal act of freeing an enslaved African for good deeds as defined by the national public policy and could be granted to an enslaved American or African who saved the life of a white racist colonial enslaver or his property, invented something which a white racist colonial enslaver can make a profit, or snitched on a fellow enslaved African who was planning a rebellion or to run away. This act encouraged enslaved Africans to gain their personal freedom, prestigious positions, and material benefits for snitching on their brothers and sisters who were planning and executing revolts and rebellions. As a matter of fact, this person created a PowerPoint presentation titled "We Fought Back." I have conversations with a lot of folks, oftentimes a lot of our younger brothers and sisters, but a lot of folks my age. Man, I couldn't be no slave. I'd have done this. I'd have done that. I wouldn't have. You ever wonder how we can still be in the age of white supremacy and institutions of oppression, systematic racism, even after all this time? If you go back and you think about slaves, right? And a plantation, and however many slaves they had, scores or hundreds, the slaves still outnumbered the white slave owners. So, people say, well, man, I mean, there's like 200 to 40 or whatever the case may be. Should have just been able to overrun them. How could they have stayed enslaved for so long? Why didn't they fight back? Why aren't we fighting back now? We're still enslaved. The numbers are the same, but we have the meritorious manumissions to ensure that we can't dismantle these institutions that are at play. Because if any of our leaders rise up, Malcolm, they send an infiltrator to destroy. Martin, Fred Hammond, and because there are those of us that like our meritorious manumissions, we don't even need to receive the order. Don't even worry about it, Massa. I'll make sure that you're safe because I don't want to lose what I got. Come on, man. You're going to mess it up for all of us. You're doing too much, man. There's a way you can talk about it, but you just can't do it that way. You're doing it the wrong way. Hey, I'm sorry. I don't know what's going on with him. Look, we can't work with him. We're just going to keep him on the outside here. We can't do nothing with her. She's too radical. And that's how you can look up and see the 20s and the 30s and the 40s and the 50s come and go and have these marginal changes. Why you can see how our wealth is at the top and how most of us are living impoverished lives. And see, they know about the cycle of poverty. They know about ACEs, right? They teach us ACEs. Adverse childhood experiences, right? How many did you have? I think I had 10. Can I break the cycle with my children? Maybe not my oldest daughter. Hopefully with Layla. But hell, even she didn't make it into a 2-parent household. Not for long. So we'll see. But it is increasingly hard to destroy something that everybody, every group, white people, BIPOC community, LGBT, everybody has a vested interest to keep these institutions intact. And the parts that they want dismantled are the parts that oppress them. So you'd have folks say, yeah, well, I'm poor or I'm this and I'm that, but at least I'm not black. Because if I'm not that, I'm still all right. I can have a drug addiction, have a bunch of violent crimes on my record. And when I decide I want to change my life, if I have the complexion for the selection, I can ascend pretty easily. I mean, they've done the studies in Harvard and other places, right? Looking at resumes, how a white person with a criminal record and a black person without a criminal record, even with more education, would still not be selected higher than the white person. So who's talking about these conversations here? Honestly. The article goes on to say, well, brothers and sisters, we still have some meritorious manumission black leaders running around here today who prioritize their personal ambition and rugged individualism over liberation of the masses of our people from colonial capitalism and its byproduct called poverty. These leaders are given prestigious positions in the capitalist system and material benefits as long as they do good deed for the maintenance of the white capitalist power structure. Dr. Martin Luther King called them manufactured leaders. And we've seen that often, right? You ever wondered how some of our black leaders got into the positions they got into? Some have come out of nowhere. And then they're there and it's like, okay, you're here. And now they're speaking for us. Cardi B has had disparaging things to say about the black community. But Bernie Sanders is interviewing her on behalf of the black community. She is speaking for the black community. That's our representation. Cardi B is now our leader. How offensive is that? But they're manufactured. And this is a term that was coined by Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. He called them manufactured leaders, created by the white power structure in order to maintain control over the black vote, politics, economics, and social movements in the black community. You will find these kinds of black leaders in government, elected office, Wall Street firms, and a myriad of social, political, and economic institutions. Our colleges, nonprofit sectors, social service sectors, community sectors, and they're the gatekeepers. You're not going to be able to play if you don't think like us. And if we don't think that you're going to go along to get along, or you're going to mess up our bag, you ain't messing up our bag. We're going to make sure you don't get nowhere near messing up our bag. So you have no space here. And we will do what we have to do to destroy you. We'll defame your character. We'll make sure that you don't get opportunities. Whatever we need to do, that's what we'll do. We'll sow seeds of dissent and distrust. Like I said, I don't know what it is about that brother. I don't know. I just don't think it would be a good idea. If I was you, I just believe there's some other candidates. There was this is one thing I could never understand, and I would see this in a lot of different places, right? They talk about diversity and inclusion. And one of the things that happens is they're looking for people to fill positions of this nature, right? And even if it's not even, particularly diversity and inclusion, but they want to have a more diverse hire or a more diverse pool, right? All of a sudden, they're doing a nationwide search. We're going to get the best. And it's like, so there's no one locally. There's no one in the next county, next city, the state. You're flying people out from Florida and DC and Baltimore. And then when you get them in, they talk the talk. It sounds good. They've got all the verbiage. They've got the buzzwords. They could toss up a word salad. Better than Panera bread. And can talk about intersectionality and diversity and inclusion and equality and critical race theory and feminism and the white patriarchy and They say all the things. You saw the CIA recruiting commercial, right? They literally put everything in the kitchen sink. And then they hire that person, and you look up in a year or 2 years, and it's like, okay, so what have you accomplished? What was done? Oh, still kind of looks the same. Really haven't done much. Why is that? And there could be lots of factors. That person could actually really been wanting to be there to do the work, but they created a position that wasn't going to have any teeth, right? Well, you're going to report to this structure. You're not going to have any real say over here. All you're going to do is write recommendations, but there's unions and everything else. So they're not going to follow any of the stuff that you say because they're going to be able to fight against it. So at the end of the day, we crossed our T's and dotted our I's. Thank you for playing. And then when it doesn't work, we're going to blame you because, again, we like breaking our toys when we're done with them. And off you go. Where's the next one at? And so it's hard, right? Because the students, the parents, they all have a part to play. So if we do get a position and then the parents and the students aren't active in their own best interest, then the person that was there was like, okay, I'm here. I'm ready to do the work. And they're looking around like, where y'all at? And then when nothing happens, then it's time to pull out the pitchforks. Well, you didn't get nothing done. Oh, man, I tried. I looked for you. You weren't here. And so sometimes I wonder if that's where the meritorious manumissions come from. Some of the people that we, engage with that are so full-throated, that seem like they would be our fiercest advocates, ascend to the places that we want them to be. And then once they get there, they're fighting the institution that exists and the people in that institution. Both or all of the above. White, BIPOC, LGBT. And then they're looking for support from their own, and that support isn't there. And it's like, well, you know what? Man, what am I doing? I might as well do what I got to do for me and my family. And then you look up 3 years from now, and they're disenfranchised. Man, y'all didn't care about me. I got in here, and you left me to just drown. I came here to support and champion for you and for us in the community. And then you disappeared. You weren't there. And then you circle back and attack me for not getting anything done. So to hell with y'all. That's why some of us can't go back home again, right? We grew up wherever we grew up. Bad situation, right? We leave home or we go to school. We fight. We do what we got to do. And it's hard, man. It's hard. And you make it through. And then folks are attacking you because they have these expectations that you're supposed to be this, that, and the other. But where were you? You had the opportunity to go with me. You attacked me. You ridiculed me. And you ridicule me now because now I'm supposed to come back and now I'm supposed to suffer for you. Man, it's tough. There's a lot of stuff going on. Meritorious Manumissions. This person goes on to say, as we move ever so swiftly through the 21st century, we must develop an independent black radical political movement to win local political seats of power and continue to mobilize mass protest movements in the streets. I actually disagree with that. I think the protests in the streets is a waste of time, honestly. The black dollar is powerful. I think if we were to vote with our dollar, we'd have far more impact than marching in the street. So I don't agree with that. We must fight against America's colonial racist capitalist system and its warmongering imperialist foreign policy. Whether it takes the form of the neo-colonial administration of Barack Obama or the neo-fascist administration of Donald Trump or the neoliberal conservative administration of Joe Biden. Again, all the same feathers on, or different feathers on the same bird. Black faces in high places does not mean black power or black liberation. Typically, it means just the opposite. Meritorious manumissions. See, we get so hung up on, oh, it's got to look like us. The question is, do they think like us? Do they have our interest at hand? Or do they have their own interest? Or do they have the institution's interest at hand? Could you imagine another demographic saying, I'm not going to do anything for just our people? I'll talk to you after the election. Come talk to me after I win. But, the document came out. Don't promise black people anything before the election. But we were good old soldiers, right? And marched out, still the biggest demographic, and then fought over, no, we, the Hispanic community came out and were saying, who was that? Eva Longoria was saying, the Hispanic vote was what got Biden in there. And some black folks were like, no, it was black women and black men, and we still did, they were fighting over who got to keep the institution, the train to continue on. And again, in my opinion, this is a worse train. Because everybody just wants to go back to sleep. It ain't that bad. Come on, man. We got to hang on to our butter biscuits. Black faces in high places does not mean black power or black liberation, especially since we're meritoriously manumissioned by the white power structure. We don't want a change in the complexion of leadership only. We want a change in the direction of leadership. We don't want personality changes. We want policy changes. And finally, we don't want symbolic change. We want radical systemic change. Remember, our struggle may be long, but our victory is certain. All power to the people. Revolution is a solution. This is from Assemblyman Charles Barron, December 3rd, 2020. And you may be asking, well, who in the heck is Assemblyman Charles Barron? And that's just the point. That's the diversity of thought that I'm talking about. That is absent. And how do we get here? Our warrior class has been destroyed, imprisoned, emasculated, destroyed. The term is called buck breaking. There's a movie out by Tariq Nasheed. I encourage people to go and check that out. But it's buck breaking. I'm going to get into buck breaking here in a little bit because this is another term that we need to talk about, right? We talked about anti-black misandry, which is the hatred of black men. We talked about meritorious manumissions, right? The rewards for keeping the institution of white supremacy going. And now we're going to get into buck breaking, our third term of the evening. So we'll have to define what buck breaking is. You know, we talk about sexual assault and rape and all the bad things that happen to women in this country. And the one thing that we don't talk about, and matter of fact, we laugh about it. It's a joke. It's funny. It's all the men that are raped in prison. And we see year after year black men being exonerated because witnesses or evidence, hey, they just executed a black man, and then found evidence that he wasn't guilty. But they killed him. Some state was trying to reinstitute firing squads. Like, it's crazy, man. What's buck breaking? Buck breaking, the use of sexual violence against enslaved men as punishment for wrongdoing. Trigger warning, buck breaking may have been the worst form of punishment. Justin Nett is the author, November 27, 2020. I'm going to go ahead and read this. You can see the image here. Black slave hanging, naked, from his hands, being whipped. Woman on her knees in front. Another man laying on his stomach, being whipped. Let's get into the story. And the enslaved men are being flogged in front of their children. Right? The emasculation. We've all watched movies, seen pictures, and heard stories of how terribly slaves were treated. Listen to the Republicans and some of our liberal brothers and sisters. They would tell you, slaves were treated pretty well. They didn't have it so bad. But the story of how sexual violence was weaponized and used by slave owners against slaves is often forgotten. Yes, slaves, including men, were often sexually violated to keep them in line or as punishment against those who dared to rebel. What is buck breaking? Mainly utilized by slave owners in the Caribbean, buck breaking was used against male slaves who were seen as defiant. The process involved the slave owner forcing the enslaved man to lower his pants and bend over a tree stump to ensure that his buttocks were propped up into the air. The enslaved man would then be flogged severely. This would weaken him so that he would not be able to resist the rape that followed. The white slave owner would then proceed to rape the slave several times. This form of punishment was worsened by the fact that it would be done in full view of other enslaved people, including the slave's family and friends. But we don't need any fucking reparations. Rape is bad. What's the worst rape story you've heard? This form of punishment was worsened by the fact that it would be done in full view, of all the other enslaved people, including the slave's family and friends. In addition to being sexually violated, the slave would also be publicly humiliated. The public punishment would instill fear in the other slaves and thus prevent any further rebellion. So my young brothers and sisters, and some that are my same age that are like, I wouldn't have. Why so many of us threw ourselves over and killed ourselves on the way here. Enslaved men who were victims of this vile punishment often ran away from the plantations or killed themselves as they were unable to deal with the humiliation and rape that they had suffered. It was often too difficult for them to integrate back into society that had watched them being emasculated in front of their wife, children, and friends. Again, we have a prison industrial complex, and it's a big joke. So while our white brothers and sisters get lesser sentences, don't get hit with felonies, get sentenced, diversion, we're in jail on marijuana charges. Being raped and brutalized. But all we talk about is sexual assault of women. Black men have been being raped from the beginning in some of the most heinous, most vile ways possible. In front of your women and children. And everyone to see. The massive popularity of the practice suggests that buck breaking may have been utilized as an outlet for homosexual slave owners to act out their sexual desires on men without attracting the stigma associated with being gay. Homosexuality during this era would have been shunned, but shockingly, raping male slaves as a form of punishment was acceptable. Male rape is a taboo topic that is not discussed often. Hell no, right? Because if you criminalize the black man, then when the black man is imprisoned and in jail and is being raped, well, you know what? If he didn't do it, that wouldn't have been his situation. He should have obeyed the law. Sound familiar? That's what a lot of our right-wing brothers and sisters say. But our left-wing brothers and sisters help to keep these institutions going. Hillary, Bill Clinton, super predators, the Biden bill, the orator of the prison industrial complex. You know, there's still black men that are in prison from when his Senate days. And we saw the footage. But black folks just couldn't wait to elect Biden. And their brothers, uncles, fathers still in prison. Male rape is a taboo topic that is not discussed often. This would explain why buck breaking seems to have been a forgotten piece of history that is not talked about or taught in schools. It is important to remember and talk about even the most tragic parts of our history because this ensures the past is not repeated. See, it is being repeated, just in a different way, right? And then when you have folks saying, I don't want my kids to learn about critical race theory. I don't want to deal with that. Because you can say, well, I didn't have slaves. Well, I didn't have slaves either, but I benefit from slavery. Your cigarette manufacturers, your cotton manufacturers, all of the jobs and businesses that helped to support the industry of slavery. Those are your ancestors. The career positions. Hey, my father's father, and my father's father. I'm a fourth generation, this, that, or other. I'm part of the family business. Established 1919. EST 1850. Even if you said, you know what, we're not going to do reparations. Somewhere they said 40 acres and a mule. In today's situation, what would that be? They say land is the only valuable thing you can't make more of. But good luck getting that. They let Bill Gates buy up the majority of farmland in America. Although slavery has, for the most part, been abolished, sexual violence is still used to inflict fear and prove dominance. This is why rape remains a rife war crime, because it terrorizes, destroys, and asserts dominance over communities. Let me read that to you again. Because in warfare, you're playing chess, not checkers. How are you going to systematically destroy a people and its race that you can't outright just kill dead in the street? Well, at least not in mass, right? Although slavery has, for the most part, been abolished, sexual violence is still used to inflict fear and prove dominance. This is why rape remains the rife war crime, because it terrorizes, destroys, and asserts dominance over communities. Who's the community? Well, I'm talking about the Black community. So when you criminalize the Black male and you lock them up, when you manufacture, lock up the ones that you don't shoot dead. When you manufacture crimes, when you over sentence, when you create a prison industrial complex, when you privatize prisons, when you don't have programs for reintegration, when they come back out into the racist institutions that exist, when they do things that say, well, if you sold drugs or you have a felony, you're not going to get any student aid. You can't stay over here in this housing. You can't go back home to your family member because she's on state assistance now. And you can't compete with the benefits that she's getting, so she doesn't want you back in the house anyway. And you're damaged. And all the while, we've been socializing Black women to say, you know what? We don't need the Black men in the home. And we'll weaponize the feminist movement and give it to you and let you continue to dismantle and cheer you all the way. And then when you look, what do you see? Well, still the white patriarchy, right? You are starting to see white women in higher power in places, but we don't see the Black women there. You raped the men. You raped the warrior class. He tossed them in prison. And by the time that they got out, they had no home, they had no family. They had no place to belong. They were damaged living in a oppressive, racist society. They went to prison and experienced horrors. And then released. Into what? And for those that have made something of themselves, with all sincerity, those are hellified odds to overcome. For example, the number of males raped during the conflict in Bosnia and Herzegovina is still unclear. A recent Amnesty International report estimated that 3,000 men and boys have been subjected to sexual violence in detention camps. It could be argued that buckbreaking seems to have sadly evolved into modern-day war crime. It's more than just a physical act. Sexual violence often breaks an individual's soul and will to fight. Part of why they did it. And where sexual violence is perpetuated in public, as was the case with buckbreaking, it not only affects the direct victim, but the entire community is left broken and unwilling to fight back. Again, if you want to read that article, put that down in the chat. So now we have a definition for buckbreaking. We started off with anti-Black misandry. We went into meritorious manumissions. And now we're talking about buckbreaking and how all of these things go together to keep these institutions of white supremacy and racism intact. And how in order for these institutions, this is a machine, right? You just plug people into the machine and they keep going. And these people do not have to be white people. Be clear. That's where the meritorious manumissions come from. Black people, some, many, are invested in keeping the institution going. Because if they actively try to dismantle it, they will be ostracized or destroyed. Malcolm, Fred, Martin, Garvey. We can go on and on and on. What we have going on, as I said before, is meritorious manumissions that exist at every level, from the highest levels of our government all the way down.
That's right, it's me.
To our
Google me, then throw your smartphone in the trash.
all the way down to our entertainment and to our communities. Oh, as a new show, Black Lady Sketch Show. I want you to meet this character here. And we'll talk about it after.
That's right, it's me. Google me, then throw your smartphone in the trash. It's making you stupid. Dr. Hadassah is back and better than ever. See. It was really important to see her at the beginning of the season. We don't get overtly political on the show, but she has very distinct opinions. Y'all don't hear me. They didn't put Harriet Tubman on the $20 bill because they don't want our dollars to be free. Above all of the other characters, she would definitely have something to say about the last year we've spent in a global pandemic and the racial reckoning that happened. The real racial reckoning will be when Black people are reinstated to our true place in society. 106 in Park. It was really fun to put her on this Spike Lee dolly and roll her down the street, spewing her opinions about the state of the world. Where is this thing airing? HBO? What's that stand for? He bought and oppressed us? This is a terrible name for a network.
So she talked about her racial reckoning and then said, our reparations are when we're back to 106 in Park. It's offensive. It's destructive. I'm going to show you a clip from the show where Gabrielle Union appears as a guest on the show. And what the dominant society and these institutions of white supremacy, racism do is they put us against each other. So they will find our own, and if they can use a subgroup like Black women who are pretty untouchable to attack the conscious group or Black males, then it makes it okay. And when there's any kind of outrage or pushback on that, then they say, oh, well, this was by Black women and they wrote it. So, I mean, we didn't do it. And then it forces other Black women to stand up for these Black women and some Black males. And then we don't get anywhere. So what they do is they throw this grenade in the room and then let us fight. And in 2 months, when the dust clears, whoever survived, no new policies, symbolic atonement, and on we go. And so here are the Meritorious Manumissions. We're going to give you your own show. But this is what you need to do. This is what we will support and elevate. We're not going to elevate the conscious Black thought. When we think about television right now, what is the equivalent to the Cosby Show today? Or A Different World? Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. Let's take a look. This is a play on Jada Pinkett Smith's Red Table Talk.
In the work. Welcome to Black Table Talk, the only place on Tariq Nasheed's internet where we can have an honest conversation. Today's topic, women in the workplace. Hi, I'm your host, Dr. Hadassah Oliyinka Ali Youngman, pre-PhD. And I'm about to take you on the overground.
How long is this intro? I do not mean to rush you, Queen Hadassah, but Kavya has me on a curfew.
See.
So I'm going to stop this a little bit. So Tariq Nasheed, for those of you that don't know who he is He is a prolific filmmaker, a documentarian, if that is a word. And he has produced 5 movies called Hidden Colors. He's produced a movie about Haiti. And he just recently released Buck Breaking, which delves into what book breaking is and how it manifests itself in today's world. And so when you're talking about, we don't know our history, right? Remember in February, I was looking at our inventors and Black people that have made impact in this country. And most people have never heard of these people and or their achievements, didn't know about their achievements. And so when you have a grassroots of Black media that is welling up from YouTube and other digital spaces, they have to get those that want meritorious manumissions, like a show like this, to attack that and to render it inert. And so these folks can come on and attack it. I'm like literally call his name out, right? Because the movie just was released. And this video was March 9th, right? Yesterday. And so to joke on her name, right? So she's calling herself a doctor. She's got a name with a bunch of syllables, which is supposed to be funny. She's Ali Youngman, and she's a pre-PhD. So she's not a real doctor. She's just calling herself a doctor. So this is supposed to be funny, but this is to discredit our own Black historians. You will hear me continue to say, right? I'm an obese Black man. You're not going to ask me for diet tips. So why would we go to our oppressor and ask them how to unoppress us? Why would we ask them to tell us our history? Because what we've been taught is our history started from slavery, from the slave boat, and that was it. But so they are allowed to take something that is sacred in the Black community, which is our Black consciousness, our Black historians, and make a joke of it. And what's insidious about it is they put Black women in the space to do it. And if any Black men speak out about it, white people don't need to worry about attacking because they'll do it themselves. Because how dare us be critical of Black women in this space? Let's continue.
Youngman, pre-PhD, and I'm about to take you on the overground.
How long is this intro?
So she's going to take you on the overground railroad. So that's supposed to be funny, right? A play on the Underground Railroad. Now you tell me what group is making fun of their own Holocaust. All right, one more definition. Holocaust. Let's let it load. When we think about Holocaust, we think about the Nazis in World War II and the Jewish community. But the definition of Holocaust is sacrifice consumed by fire, a thorough destruction involving extensive loss of life, especially through fire. Number 3, usually the Holocaust, the mass slaughter of European civilians and especially Jews by the Nazis during World War II. And 3B, a mass slaughter of people, especially genocide. So there's a Holocaust in Rwanda, and there's a Holocaust right here in America. Okay? But you're not going to hear about the Jewish community making light and making fun of their Holocaust. But here we can openly joke about it. So we're talking about buck breaking. We're talking about the rape of men, the whipping, the beating of men, bent over a post, and then rape repeatedly after they're whipped into submission in front of their women and children. And the Underground Railroad is created to free us from those horrific conditions. And that's just one element that we're talking about. We're not talking about where the term motherfucker came from. Is there a book where they tell you that they put a bag over the slave's head and made the sons have sex with their mothers? See, we don't want to talk about critical race theory. We don't want to talk about reparations. But no, you guys didn't have slaves. This is what Meritorious Manumissions looks like. So I expected attacks on myself to be swift and to come from several different groups.
I do not mean to rush you, Queen Hadassah, but
Subservient African queen. So what you're gonna see here in the last bit of this 4.5 minute clip here is the anti-black misandry that is openly on display.
Kavya has me on a curfew.
See. No, Gabrielle Union. Black women babies are not allowed to issue curfews. Only our original kings can do that. Supreme Rob Meek told me to be home by 3.
Is he here? Can he sign a head wrap for me?
Unfortunately.
So from The Color Purple, we have the image of Danny Glover. As to be these abhorrent, abusive men. When it just really wasn't true. How do we know? Oh, we could look at buck breaking. But they just play into the dismantling and the trivialization of our experience. For sport, it's fun. This is a minstrel show.
Fortunately, no. He does not fraternize with married women, except for me and all 8 of his wives.
Oh, that's very Doug Christie of you guys.
Anyway, welcome to the show.
So again, the hypersexuality of black men. Oftentimes it's like, the pot calling the kettle black, right? I'm going to say you're the thing that I really am. Eight wives, huh?
It says here now that you're an actress, an author, a television host, a fashion designer, and a spokeswoman.
Thank you.
Why so many jobs, and how does your husband deal with this betrayal?
Betrayal? I think my husband appreciates a woman. Oh, I'm sorry. Female.
Thank you.
That makes her own money, is incredibly flexible, and still is able to raise.
I'm glad you said that. Now, as everybody knows, there are many factors working towards the destruction of the black family. Number 1, wedge sneakers. Number 2, working women. And if you ask you
So why would working women be the destruction of the black family? And wedge shoes? Or what? The thing is you will have white folks defending this. You'll have black folks defending this. It's not even funny. It's offensive. But this is what anti-black misandry looks like, but it's okay, right? You see the commercials where, pretty much in every show that you see, men are doofuses. Can't leave them alone. They'll destroy everything. Or in the case of the black men, we're criminalized, we're over-sexual, we're lazy. We're criminal.
Work right now? I don't get paid for this. I have made no money doing anything. Now, Miss Gabrielle, let's talk about your professional goals.
Sure.
With your king, Dwayne Wade.
Oh, shit. Okay.
Now, how do you feel about your wife out here working like a free-range chicken?
Well, I'm sure my cardboard king would love for me to be home a little bit more.
Shh. Earth, let your God speak.
And so what this is doing is saying, hey, the black consciousness section of foundational black Americans, the black sector, are misogynist. And she is part of that sector, right? So she is trying to check Gabrielle Union and say, hey, this misogynist man needs 8 women, right? Now, this is her husband. And she's allowing the joke to be pushed as though he is misogynistic and oppressive. Curfews and come home at a certain time and 8 wives. This is what anti-black misandry looks like. This is propaganda, right? And so the problem is when you see these things over and over again, you say, oh, it's harmless. It's just fun. It's just comedy. But this is what people are consuming. And so when they're in a jury, yeah, you're a criminal. You're over-sexualized. You're lazy. You're ignorant. You deserve it. You're guilty. Their own husband.
My husband, nay, God. He just retired from the universe of the NBA.
Why would he do that? Such a lucrative job.
He's a little old, and he's.
How dare you speak about him in that way? I'm so sorry, cardboard Dwayne Wade. Please continue.
But I have.
He's a little old. I'm just going to continue.
I have worked my whole career.
That's the problem.
But I'm actually fine being one of the breadwinners in my family.
Breadwinners? Yeah. Oh no! White people got you thinking bread is a prize. Sister, may I call you Oshun?
As long as I can have my hand back.
Oshun, this is not your fault. Like Lauryn Hill, you've been miseducated and you're late to the true knowledge. But we can get you back. Oh yes, all you have to do is enroll in my learning center.
Yeah. Is that like a school? Because you need to leave every child behind. Oh, I'm sorry. Did you just send me a Venmo request for $58,000?
And that's just the first installment. For another $700,000, you can become a founding pharaoh in the Dr. Hadassah Institute for Elevation, Conspiratization, Melanization, and Vitamins.
Vitamins.
Oh, that's another thing that they want to do, right? We know that we have been oppressed through our water, through our food. Abortion clinics. But we're conspiracy theorists. And, send the Black consciousness money. And something that's interesting in this is, it's like, is it a school? Well, what are your credentials? And where do we get our credentials, right? Because right now, to get your credentials, for me to get a bachelor's degree or a master's degree, I have to go to an institution that's accredited by the institution of white supremacy and the organizations that exist, right? They're the ones that sign off on that. We look at the Oscars and the Emmys and everything else, right? We are going to tell you what's good. We don't have other people that are on here. So we know the historical issues with the Oscars. I think of Dr. Sebi as a naturalist, the minister of wellness, Nathaniel, can't think of Nathaniel's last name, but talking about eating your G-bombs, your grains, your nuts, your seeds. Plant-based diets. When we have Flint, what's that, Cancer Alley down south? See, these things are real and they're not conspiracies. And they're all over the country. Access to health care. Or lack of access. But if we don't have our history, and the history that is taught to us is incorrect, being kind, right? Can't remember what they tried to turn the slave trade into. They tried to talk about, it was just trade and it was commerce and business. I can't remember what they were putting in the textbooks a couple decades ago, where they wanted to remove that it was slavery. And so as our own historians are going back and tracing our lineage back and figuring out what we've done, where we come from, what our impact was. The only way that it is validated is, well, where did you go? Is it accredited? See, we don't even value ourselves.
So you want me to be a founding pharaoh of your pyramid scheme? No, thanks.
But,
no.
see, no. With your tuition, you will also receive the singular sacred text that will help build your mind to the ultimate level. The earth is flat and other reasons you shouldn't vote.
But people should vote.
Why? Cast a ballot? Think about it. Ballot is just 2 letters away from bullet. They want us to kill our community.
Again, trivializing the fact that right now it really doesn't matter who you vote for. They've already told you, the Republican side is not saying that they're going to do anything for you. And the Democratic side, the liberal side, is saying, hey, we're the party of, social programs and social justice, this, that, and the other, but not necessarily for you. Or a high tide rises all boats. Or now, as you'll see from the new media that's kind of rising up in the middle, right? The moderates, I think of shows like The Hill, where you've got a Republican and a Democrat that were disenfranchised from their side and have now come to the middle that are saying, no, you know what? It's not really about race. It's about class. And if you address the class things, the race things will actually kind of sort a lot of their things out. Or we can dismantle class all day long, but we can't really give you any solutions on how to dismantle race. But if we just look at class, we will make it a pretty sizable impact on race. And I'm not saying that, there aren't racial issues in the country, but, more impact would be made here. And, it's just your argument. People aren't receptive to your argument because it turns people off and it makes them feel some kind of way. So you've got to find another way to kind of package it. So packaging it under class, a high tide rises all boats, right? $15 minimum wage for everybody, right? That's not only going to help you, but it's going to help everyone. And don't you want that? But you just trivialized our issues with voting and voter suppression, which is happening right now in Georgia. But they're so tone deaf as to make fun of the corner of Black consciousness to say, hey, there are some issues here, but we're going to make a joke out of it. Because you know what? Those people are crazy and those people are stupid and you shouldn't listen to them. Listen to us. We're rational. That's what Gabrielle Union is saying, right? No, you need to vote. You need to vote in Kamala Harris. Remember? This isn't a racist country. I know what I said 8 months ago. But it's all better because I'm here now. I'm not doing anything, but I'm here.
Ma'am, this is a takeout menu, but if you want to talk empowering Black literature.
Yes!
Literature.
Literature! Let's do it!
My New York Times bestselling book, A Woman Who Actually Farts. The Freedom of Flatulence. Chapter 1.
Get it out of there! You have disgusted me. You never told me you were literate. This is a total abomination. Until next time. This has been Black Table Talk.
You didn't think I could read? I had hoped not.
Explain yourself. How much can you read? The whole alphabet? That's why you only have one husband.
I've had a couple.
You know what? Let's talk about that.
I shouldn't have read in that first marriage.
Thank you.
It was a book club. Queen Hadassah.
How many books did you get through?
Dozens.
Oh, my.
How is that funny? Honestly, how is that funny? I didn't think you were literate. Which is a real issue for our children nationwide in this country. But our Black boys are woefully illiterate in 2021. So you make a joke of the new Black media, the grassroots that doesn't have the support of the white power structure that says, hey, you know what? Here's what we're going to promote. You can put out the WAP. We'll promote the hell out of that. We could put Cardi B in with presidential hopefuls. We can give you a show on HBO. Here's your own minstrel series. As long as you're willing to tear down foundational Black Americans trying to teach the truth. And for those meritorious manumissions, yep, I'm all for it. And you know what? It's perfect. Look at these Black women. They'll make this comedy. It's nice and funny. The Last Frontier. You can make fun of fat people and you can make fun of Black men. You can also shoot them down the street and imprison them blame them for their own situation and show no empathy for all the things that they go through. But for everyone else, addiction is a disease. Housing first. This is where we find ourselves at. Buck breaking is powerful. And they have to get us to participate in it. Let me read a little bit more on buck breaking. I do want to show you a preview of the movie. This was written in May 28 of 2019. What is buck breaking? In essence, buck breaking occurred when an angry American slave master thought a slave was being defiant and needed to be taught a lesson. Hence, the African male slave would be forced to lower his pants and bend forward over a tree stump or similar protrusion with his buttocks propped up in the air. The American slave master and or someone he'd appoint to carry out an ensuing inhuman act would then proceed to flog the slave almost to the state of unconsciousness. Circumstances would then get worse for the slave, as the slave master, whom likely was driven by homosexual urges, would then proceed to rape the slave in front of his wife, kids, and friends, whilst inviting other white homosexual males to join in on the heinous sodomy act. It was the ultimate emasculation of the African male slave for being defiant toward his white slave masters. Accordingly, buck breaking was an ungodly, evil disciplinary tool employed to strike fear in the hearts of African male slaves, his families, peers, community alike, and that they were never to challenge their slave masters on any level. Often, African male slaves who endured such brutality and humility would commit suicide or abandon their families altogether. Often, African male slaves who endured such brutality and humiliation would commit suicide or abandon their families altogether. So if we think about the buck breaking of the prison industrial complex, of over-criminalizing, making up, manufacturing crimes, incarcerating us by the hundreds of thousands, to be raped, to be humiliated, to be ostracized, to be brutalized, to be isolated, only to come out and find that the proxy of their fatherhood is either the state that is now taking care of his family, or a woman who may have another man who's outside that wants to help take care of the household, or the woman who is now having forced to do it themselves and cannot wait for him to come back out. And then you tell them, well, you need to be a father to your child. You need to pay child support. You need to do this. You need to do that. How? Where? See, so many people are crying in this country talking about, oh, we need to raise the minimum wage to 15, which is still not going to be enough. But even if you find yourself in the most ideals of situation, even at $15 an hour, most people still don't have the ability to live. And then when you take the fact that the average black man makes $45,000 a year, and you're taking 25 up to 50% of that for child support or restitution, in a housing market that is ridiculous nationwide, What are their choices? What are they supposed to do? Oh, get another job. Oh, go to college, go to school. With what? You hit me with this crime, so now I can't get financial aid. Well, I went through the institution of education, so I'm illiterate. I don't have the math, reading, or writing skills to be a proper college student. I can't tell you how many people I've seen come through that college, and many who have just graduated from high school and were taking developmental math and English courses that weren't even close to college level, but that's where they were supposed to be. There are folks that would come in. English 101 is the first college level English course. You got English 91, English 98, English 99, and then 101. Math 107 is the college algebra. Math and Society, I believe it's called. You had Math 90A, Math 90B, Math 94, Math 99, and then you had Math 107. That's a year of prerequisite math courses to get to the college level course that you should be able to place into right out of high school. Now I only went to the 9th grade, so I can actually speak from experience. And even I placed better than many of the high school students that came in and took a placement test at OC. Community college, right? I'm gonna read this statement here. So, young folk, what are your feelings around the sagging pants fad, considering the deplorable history behind it? You can also see the 5 horrifying ways enslaved African men were sexually exploited and abused by their white masters. This is by Elizabeth Offasol Johnson. Related content: affluent American white women who owned African male slaves forced them to engage in sexual acts too. Read about it here. And I'll put this in the chat should you want to read it. Begin with anti-black misandry. Black men are lazy, ignorant, superstitious, homosexual, criminal, and cowardly. In 2021, we are shot dead in the street. But it's shown on public TV. But the N-word on TV is offensive. And we have to blot it out, and we don't dare say it on the airwaves. With Meritorious Manumissions, they can dismantle reparations, tangible institutional change, the ability to go past symbolic atonement for the current oppression that is happening in this country. Hell with slavery. The current. And they will do everything that they can to keep this institution going. And that means even our own champions that are out here doing the work or so-called work for the marginal gains to receive the meritorious manumissions, to be the gatekeepers, to keep a more radical or quickly moving change, a more tangible change, a more tangible atonement. It's just something about him. I don't know. I heard this, that, and the other about her. I mean, you can work with her if you want. I just don't know if it's going to go well for you. Man, come on, brother. We trying to do some things here. And if you coming this hard, they're just gonna, then we're not gonna be able to do what we need to do. You need to fall back a little bit. Now we're gonna just create this ecosystem over here. They're gonna let us into this space. And we got to make sure that you don't get into this space and ruin the bag for us. Hit dogs holler and you know who you are. See, the thing is that there are many of us that are like, we're waking up. Meritorious Manumissions. We're still enslaved. We're still oppressed. We can free ourselves a little bit at a time. You're incentivized to keep us where we're at. We're no longer satisfied. And because we're not going to go along to get along, we no longer feel like we got to hold back. We're coming. Won't be me. Won't be tomorrow. We're coming. I hope that this was informative. I hope that you learned some new terminology. Hope you've learned about things that they don't talk about in many of these circles. And when they speak about intersectionality, they tend to leave out the heterosexual black male, except for that we are just as oppressive and the patriarchy needs to be dismantled. You learned about anti-black misandry, you learned about meritorious manumissions, and you learned about buck breaking. All things that have been around for a very long time. And many of us know it as being a sellout or a snitch. But there's more to it. I will save this article for next time. I'm going to put this in the chat. I'm not going to read this right here today. I've been going for quite a while. But if you want to read about sexual relations between elite white women and enslaved men in the antebellum South, socio-historical analysis by J.M. Elaine. That link is down there for you. Maybe I'll read it next time. I haven't read that. I think it would be pretty interesting to read it. And again, we're all waking up. And I know that it's hard. I know that I chased meritorious manumissions for a very long time. That's how I was raised. That's how I was domesticated, plugged into the matrix. Change will be slow. Change will be hard. There is no way that I or people that are just waking up are going to be 100% congruent as they find their way, as they try to break their habits, as they try to free their bonds of slavery, physical metaphorical, mentally, spiritually. It's going to take time. It's so hard for those of us that are trying to make a difference, that want to make a difference, to move forward as we are waking up. And unfortunately, one of the things that I think needs to be addressed is for those of us that wake up, we can be told by the woke party that we're not awake yet, so we need to just shut up. Or because we operated in a certain way, we can't come back home. I don't agree with that sentiment. There's an analogy that I heard earlier today that I loved, and I think that it's so powerful, right? I'm going to get it wrong, so I'll try to think about it, look it up later. But the saying kind of went something like this. If I'm a champion for the cause, why would you care what color car I drove? Why does the car that I drive have anything to do with what I'm trying to do and push forward? Does that make anything that I'm saying any less true? And again, I'm not doing it justice. But what it had to do with was interracial relationships. And so in some circles, if you are dating outside your race, then there are those that feel like you can't speak on Black issues because you're outside of your race. And I wholeheartedly disagree with that. I was telling someone the other day, I identify as Christian. Questioning. I identify as Christian. And as you read the Bible and you think about, okay, you're going to go to heaven. What does heaven look like? Some people are like, oh, I'll see my dad in heaven. I'll see my family members, my loved ones, whatever. Some people say, we transform into something else and it won't be quite the same. Because I'm like, wait a minute. If we're in a monogamous society and I get married and, my wife dies or, I get remarried and then we all end up in heaven, how does that work? You know what I'm saying? It's like, that's weird. But, okay. But heaven, it's not going to be a Black heaven. It's not going to be a white heaven. It's going to be a heaven of everyone, right? That lived righteous. Slavery would not have ended if it wasn't for white people that helped to abolish slavery. I think, just as a statement, you are entitled to love who you love. And at the end of the day, everyone deserves love. And so if the person that wants to love you is not the same as you, who cares? Doesn't mean that you can't advocate for issues. And I think that for us to truly wake up and to move forward, you can say, oh, well, that could optically get in the way. How could you be a black man or a white or a black woman dating a white man or a white woman or outside your way, outside your race, and to be advocating for your race, right? Because some people, a lot of folks, feel like you're disqualified now because you didn't find someone that was in your race. It's like, so I'm supposed to be alone unless I can find someone that is suited for me and I'm suited for them. Or I'm supposed to, either one of us is supposed to settle for each other just because. Like, that's the same thing of tokenizing the positions, right? We need more black faces in higher places. And who cares if the black face is acting the same way as the racist white face? What difference does it make? So we get so hung up on that. If you find someone that loves you, hang on to that. That's the only thing that matters. Do not worry about what other people think or your contribution to the cause because you love someone that is outside of you or the community. I think if we're intellectually honest, we've got to move past that. And again, for those of us that identify as Christian, I know that there's a lot, right? I mean, we are definitely not a monolith. There's such diversity of thought in the Black community. But at the end of the day, if Layla, chooses to marry, I hope that she finds someone that she loves and someone who loves her genuinely, regardless of who they are. We just have to have deeper discussions and a more open dialogue. We have to give people the space to learn and to grow. We need to encourage that knowledge. Listen to their perspective. Listen to their concerns. You see, if we don't give folks a space to inquire, to question, to learn, and if we just beat it down, you've got to wake up. If you weren't born into a family that raised you in a way to be woke, and again, I hate to say woke, I should use a different word because they've made that a bad word now, right? And at some point, you have to come to your own awakening, to your own understanding, and that's going to happen at different times. I wouldn't have thought to speak like this in 2012. I was trying to get a job at the college. It's a white institution. These folks ain't going for that. That's not hyperbolic. I remember when they put out the call for the diversity and inclusion position. All hell broke loose on that campus. It's a waste of funds. We don't need it. We don't want it. It's a revolt. But what are you supposed to do? You're not awake. You're trying to do the best you can. You're trying to change your life for the better. You've had your own experiences. 9th grade education, in and out of jail. Disabled. You go to college because society is telling you that's the only way that you're going to make it and make a family wage, especially since you can't use your physical body anymore. So you get a bunch of degrees and you try to fit in. And you're seeing things, but it's just you. And you have your mentors that are telling you, hey, man, I know I'm here and I can actually fight. And they actually can't really do anything to me, but I still don't want to do anything. I just don't want the heat. I went through this stuff for 15, 20 years. I'm done now. It's a young person's game. But there's even less support now than there was then. So then am I supposed to keep it 100 and go and work for McDonald's? So I'm not selling out to the college or to the Navy? Is that what I'm supposed to do? With $50,000 in student loans? See, it's complex. Then you try entrepreneurship and you have a business, and do your own folks patronize you? Or is it the majority of the white community that the black community is saying, hey, you need to be rallying against it? It's complex. And we can talk the tough talk, but most of us are the exception and not the rule. So it's great that some of us made it and found favor and things ended up working out for us. But that's not typically how it goes. That's why there's so many of us that are still in the wilderness. And we can't lose sight of that. Because if we're going to bring our people out, we have to be stern. We have to be directed. But we also have to be empathetic. I thank you for joining me tonight. I know this is a long one, but there was so much to unpack. Anti-Black Misandry, Meritorious Manumissions, buck breaking, the highest levels of our power, Vice President, Republican Senator, America's Not Racist, all the way down to our Black queens. Exercising anti-Black misandry and destroying the Black conscious community for Meritorious Manumissions. Wanted to put it all together for you in a way where you can see and make those connections and understand what's going on and what it looks like. Tremendously difficult, but we're here to do the work and understand. I expect people to sing shame, insult, need to be right, and guilt. Do what you do. I'm Marwan Cameron. This is The Conduit.